titled Optimizing Students' Learning and Motivation in Online Education. By reading the title, I believe that this topic is considerably relevant to this institution. The spirit of Sheikh Nurjati State Cyber University, Islamic University Cirebon, to become a leading institution in providing high quality access and equally distributed quality education in the digital era. So I think this is the time to give our undivided attention to Professor Martin's talk. Probably he will talk in more or less 60 minutes. I hope it is enough. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming Professor Andrew Martin.
Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. And I'm just checking that the PowerPoint should be working. Was that turned off while I was speaking? While Sharif was speaking? Because it's not showing here. Great. Andrew, is your mouse working? I can't quite see it. That's great. Before I commence my keynote, I would like to add to Professor Lyon's gratitude and thanks. I very much appreciate being at the Cyber Islamic State University in Cirebon. I know the rector, Professor Jalani, can't be here today, but I greatly appreciate the Vice Rector, Professor Jamali, having me here, and also the Dean, Dr. Saifuddin, and of course Dr. Lala Bumela Sidamantara and his team for organising this event. Thank you very much. I agree with Andrew, and I know it's confusing. You have two Andrews here. I think when I was at Charles Darwin University in March, there were three Andrews who were speaking, and so it's a very common name, but it can be confusing. I agree with Andrew that this is a very important point in this institution's history. It's a little scary when you're beginning something new, particularly when you're beginning at an institutional, starting something new at an institutional level. But there are also many opportunities for new frontiers in learning, new frontiers in education, and because you are in some ways building this from the ground up, it means that you can build into the DNA of the institution important principles and foundations. Other universities may have to do these things on the fly, but you have a unique opportunity, and so it's a nice time to be contributing. When moving into a cyber environment, when moving into an online environment, there's a lot of focus on technology. You'll have to get that right. There's a lot of focus on logistics. There's a lot of focus on how to organise educational structures and how to organise and reorganise departments. And those conversations will happen. And I think Andrew was speaking to a lot of that as well. I'm a psychologist, and so I am focused on the student. That is my business. And so you will have to make a lot of big decisions, top-down decisions, how to organise departments and faculties and schools and so on. As a psychologist, I am bottom-up. What are the things that you need once you're online and you are in a lesson or you are in a an online or cyber activity, what do your students need in order to optimize their learning and motivation? Because we have made a lot of mistakes in online learning, and when I say now is a good opportunity for you, you can learn a lot from those. Because we did it on the fly. We just did it without much thought, without much planning, without much rigour, and a lot of students switched off, and a lot of students failed to learn effectively. And so it is an opportunity. And so that's my business. When you have your students in an online environment, what are the key principles to optimize their learning and motivation? Because you can have all the technology and organizational structures under the sun, but if the students are not learning effectively, the institution will be seen as not being successful. If the students are not motivated and engaged, the word will get out and the reputation will decline. That happens in the West, that happens in Australia, and so people like me focus on when you have your students online or in a cyber environment, what are the things that educators can do? Whatever that happens to be, whether it is Islamic education, whether it is Arabic, or whether it is learning the Quran, learning about educational psychology, learning about the sociology of education, whatever it is, there are key principles of human learning and motivation that if we can look to them to help us guide how to design lessons, how to design assignments and assessments, then you will optimise students' learning. And the reputation of the institution, once word goes out and quality assurance assessments and reviews of this institution show that students are learning and motivated, the reputation rises. That is how it works. And so that's what I want to talk to today. And also in line with Andrew, I'm offering ideas. This is the world according to Andrew. Well, this Andrew. We just heard the word according to that Andrew. Now it's this Andrew. So I do not know your institution very well. You know it well. I do not know your students very well or at all. You know them. And so you listen to what I have to say and you make sense of that as relevant to your needs, your principles, your philosophies of scholarship. That is what I'm here for, to say, here is what I've learnt in my 30 to 35 years of research on student learning and motivation, and you take from that what resonates, what you know will work, and even some things that are challenging, but you think, yes, that's a good direction to take this. So I offer my thoughts and ideas with respect and humility, and lay them in front of you for you to look at them and decide for you what works for you and your students. So a bit of background. I think, yes, we've moved well beyond the what we call the brick and mortar. We've moved into online formats. Most students now engage in some form, in fact all students engage in some form of online learning. And that'll be the challenge for this institution. What will make this? What is the point of differentiation? If all universities are engaged in cyber education of one form, what differentiates this from other institutions? And so, as Andrew indicated, new technology is released at such a rapid pace, faster than we can keep up with it in many ways. And so as that pace is unfolded, there's been research to look at, well, what is the effectiveness of these online environments? And so, as we know, online can be purely online or hybrid or blended. There's lots of opportunities in terms of the use of desktops, tablets, mobile phones and so on, VR headsets and the like. There are many content and learning management systems that we're familiar with online now, and so we have Canvas and Moodle and so on. And there's also, online can either be synchronous, so that it is in real time and delivered in real time, or asynchronous, so it might be a recorded lecture, or students can dip in at a time of their choosing. It's often claimed that young people are digital natives, and so we assume they know how to learn online. We assume that we can present anything in any way because they're digital natives, they'll understand it immediately. Well, they are digital natives when it comes to Facebook. They are digital natives when it comes to gaming, and so by digital natives I mean they just know it naturally. They're digital natives when it comes to WhatsApp and all these applications. But when it comes to learning challenging, complex material online, they are not. It does not come naturally, and so they are digital novices. And what that means is, as a novice, we do know that students, if they are not taught effectively, they use poor search terms. They use ChatGPT ineffectively and inefficiently and inappropriately. They don't know how to identify a quality website or how to identify quality information online. They don't know how to extract information from that website and then use it in an assignment or apply it in a high quality way. And so these things do not come naturally to them. And so even though a lot of other things do, these things do not. Because this is what we're looking at here is actually a learning task. And just because it's on a screen doesn't make it easier necessarily for a student to do. And so we need to move students from novices to experts. And how do we do that? Because once we do that, that's when students have learned. And today I want to just do a brief review of research on the effectiveness of online learning. I want to do a bit of a brief review on the factors that seem to make a difference between ineffective online learning and effective online learning. And then I want to look at 3 factors that really do, in my research field, make a big difference. The quality of the instruction in an online environment, the nature of the role of motivation in an online environment, and most importantly perhaps, the fact that we are social creatures. Look at us gathered here today. We could have done this online, or we could have done it, submitted to all submitted to a report that could have been delivered to the dean or the rector. No, we gather as human beings. We are social. And so what we do know is that the extent to which students are connected and feel connected to their instructor plays a big part in how well they learn from that instructor. And so online, how do we manage to make connections with our students when we even use the word remote? How do us as social creatures who learn in social contexts and group settings, how do we maintain those connections in remote learning situations? And I want to look at that as well, because that's important. Other things that I won't touch on but are equally important, what we've learnt, is issues around mental health and well-being. When students are spending a lot of time at home and not on campus or in person, we know mental health and well-being. Institutions are learning to stay in touch with that too. I also won't touch on things like ChatGPT. I won't go into that, but that is a big presence as well now in online learning, and institutions in Australia are struggling with where does generative AI sit in our higher education system, not only in terms of students, but also to what extent does staff use generative AI to augment their teaching and learning and research. Australia and other nations are really struggling with that, and I see the institution being at the point of its development that it is is in a good position to get ahead of that game, and make some decisions around how generative AI is part of its online presence. So, a brief review: the mixed evidence on the effectiveness of online learning. And this is something that it'd be nice to say it's all positive, but it's simply not. And so an institution that understands that is the institution that is going to get it right. And so on the positive effects, there are meta-analyses showing that various online approaches to instruction generally have small to moderate effect sizes in learning. So online environments can be good for students' learning. They show that mobile computer-supported learning can enhance collaborative learning. Students with special needs, when technology is applied effectively, can learn more effectively. Similar with language learning students, and that when implemented effectively, blended or hybrid learning can be more effective than in-class approaches. There are also studies showing negative effects, and so for various reasons, there are cases where in-person learning is more effective than online learning. And there's also studies that show no difference. Students can be in class or online, doesn't matter, or minimal differences. So we have a very mixed bag when it comes to, if someone asked you tonight, if you went out to dinner with them and you told them, look, we're becoming a cyber university, and someone asked you, so is online learning good? The reality is you'd say it depends. How do we make sense of these mixed findings? And this is a bit of a technical word. We make sense of it through what we call moderators. And that is, and I'm not talking about my moderator here. We make sense of it. There are factors that moderate the effects of online learning. So what I mean by that is we look at, well, what's the effect of online learning, online education on learning? Well, whether that is good, bad or mixed depends on a number of key factors. For example, the quality of online instruction. And so we now know that online education doesn't solve all problems. It can be effective if we understand the moderators. What are the factors that make it effective? And the more we can build those in as guiding principles, the more our online education is likely to be effective. And so a little bit of a whirlwind tour of some of the moderators that we know affect how effective online learning is and online education is. One is instruction. And so, and I'm going to on this page, I'm going to go into each of these in more detail. So the quality of instruction. How is that educator, that teacher, communicating with students, interacting with students, the type of work that they're assigning, the way they ask students to do that work. Teacher interactions. And so, how connected is the instructor to students in online learning? We know that the more students feel remote from the teacher, the less engaged they are in that online learning situation. And then the third is motivation and engagement. And so there are ways to deliver online instruction that inspires students, that engages students. And there are ways to deliver online learning that switches students off. Some other moderators, technology skill. How skillful are students in using the technology that they will have to as they navigate your online cyber education? Personalisation. Andrew is getting at that. And so, to what extent does a student feel, hey, this course is for me. These tasks are for me. the risk of online education, like the massive online courses Andrew referred to, the MOOCs, don't give students that sense. You feel you are one of 600,000, and by implication, you don't feel like you belong. You're just one of thousands. The more a student can say, this teacher understands me, and not in a deep way, that Andrew quite rightly pointed out, just in terms of assigning tasks that the student relates to, for example. Parent involvement. We find that at home, where parents are able to encourage students and make sure they're not on the wrong websites and all that sort of stuff, and setting times, and, you know, you shouldn't be gaming, you should be doing your homework and all that stuff. Now, that's a challenge for this institution because you're dealing in most cases with adults who won't have parents looking over their shoulder and so on. So self-regulation will become a big thing for your students, and I'll talk about self-regulation. How much access to technology? In Australia, there are a lot of students who live in poverty. There is, for example, one computer in the house that a family of 5 need to use. Mobile phones are not the perfect learning environment. They're helpful as an aid, but you need a computer or a laptop. And so access to technology. The learning outcome. And so there are some learning outcomes that online education is very well suited for. The subject domain. It seems like in some subjects online education is easier to deliver and administer, whereas other subjects it's not so easy and more thought needs to go in. So, the moderators today. What moderators will I be looking at? I'll be looking at this point, when a parent comes to me and says, my child is struggling at school, my first thinking is this a problem of skill or is it a problem of will? So skill means, do they have dyslexia? Do they have difficulty with numbers? In Australia, do they have an executive function issue, such as ADHD or whatever? These are skill issues. But sometimes it's not skill. They can read just fine. It's a will issue, a motivation. They're not interested. They don't value it. And so I like to think of things in terms of will and skill. And so that being the case, now I'm wondering why I'm now large here in the slide is, there we go. Someone's just making sure I'm paying attention. And so skill and will today, as far as skill goes, I'll be looking at instruction. The nature of instruction builds students' skills in maths, in Islamic education, whatever. The will side of it is motivation and engagement. How interested, how inspired, how enthusiastic, how energised are your students? If they are, your institution's reputation will rise because it will become known as a place where, yeah, they're great courses, I was really interested. Should I go with UIN? Yeah, it was good. I was switched on the whole time. And then skill and will. Teacher-student relationships are the foundation of building skill and will. So they're the 3 moderators that I'll be looking at. These are 3 factors that if you get them right, you will optimise students' learning. So the first, instruction, skill. Okay, online learning is challenging, but there are also many opportunities available. It can also be inspiring, but it's not easy. And so there are challenges in, how frequently things are assessed, difficulty of assessment, the content to be covered online, subject difficulty, deadlines, distractions, all of these things. A lot of most of these also happen in the classroom, but online as well as a couple of other things, such as distractions at home and in learning environments. In class, the teacher can manage a lot of those distractions to help learning, but when the teacher's not there, those distractions become something to navigate. And so we need instruction that's appropriate to the challenge. And cognitive and instructional psychology has taught us a lot on how we can deliver instruction that helps students in challenging learning situations. And human memory is a big part of this. And so a bit of a crash course on the human memory system here. And so I really want you to understand this slide, because when you're thinking about how to develop material and deliver material, you have to understand the human brain and the human memory system and how it works. And so the thing that I'll be focusing on is these two things. It's these two things that teachers need to navigate, online or in class, in person. And so what happens is information comes in from the environment. You hear something, you see something, you smell something, you taste something, you touch something. So it comes into the sensory register. And then if, for example, if it's the teacher in an online environment, or you're looking at an animation online, or you're looking at an online lecture, you're seeing and you're hearing stuff, and that's coming in. Now, the aim of education, ultimately, is for students to learn what you teach them. And when the information is stored in long-term memory, we declare that it has been learnt. And so almost everything that you do depends on your long-term memory. How did you even get here today? You needed to reach into your long-term memory and say, right, now, where's the campus again? Now, it becomes so automatic you didn't have to think that. But you had to learn where the campus is. It was all in your long-term memory. How do you even know how to open a water bottle? How do you even know what a water bottle is? It's all back there. And so how do you know your times tables in maths? How can you read Arabic? How do you learn sociology? How can you do these things? It's because you took the time to learn it, and it was stored in long-term memory. So that's the aim of education, to build up the body of long-term memory in students. Now, here we go. Now, so far so good, fine. We sort of all know that. But here's the tricky bit. To get to long-term memory, it has to pass through our working memory or our short-term memory. And so our working memory and our short-term memory is like our real-time conscious awareness. So it's about 7 seconds long. It's about the length of a phone number, and then it disappears. And so everything that I'm talking to you about right now is passing through your working memory. If I started speaking very quickly in a very complex and roundabout way, most of it would not get through your working memory because it's just too much too soon. And so that means it won't get to your long-term memory, and that means you won't learn it. And so working memory is the conscious part of our thinking, and we use it to just process information and perform tasks in real time. And it does that by always retrieving information from long-term memory and applying it. So when you did I'm not sure when you did your last exam, but when you did your last exam, you were answering in real time, and you were constantly drawing on what was in your long-term memory, what you studied. And it's dump and reload. So you just write that sentence and you draw it back to your long-term memory for the next part of the sentence. And that's how you answer things. That's how you drive. You're always calling information in from long-term memory. Now, if long-term memory is overloaded, then it means we will only part of the information will get to our long-term memory if working memory is overloaded. Or it may mean that we get something confused. We get it around the wrong way. Or we don't understand what the teacher's saying. And we make slower progress. So the aim of education, including online learning, in some cases especially online learning, is to deliver instruction in a way that doesn't burden the working memory too much, especially when students are new and novices, when they're beginning students. And so working memory is limited. 15 seconds, the length of a phone number, and that's all working memory can hold. And this presents an enormous challenge for teachers. How do they deliver complex material and get through that working memory to long-term memory? That's a big challenge. And there's a few things that will jam working memory even more. One is anxiety. You think about when you're worrying about something, you can't take much in. You're not going to learn much. The teacher will be talking, but your mind is somewhere else. Your working memory is jammed with your worrying thoughts. Another thing that will jam working memory are distractions. If I was talking and at the same time here a video was playing, you would only take that much of what I'm saying in. Now in online situations, particularly when students are doing self-directed tasks on websites and so on, the capacity for distractions are enormous. You've got a mobile phone sitting next to you, you're getting pop-ups on the screen, you see a link to a website, it's not part of the assignment, but it looks really interesting and fun. And so the distractions on screen, there's lots of flashing and buzzing and sounds that are actually not central to what's being learnt, but they're there to entertain. And yes, they do entertain, but it means the learner's not learning much of what they need to learn. So online, there is vast capacity for students to become distracted. And so you need to think about how do you manage content and activities in a way that helps students stay focused. Because if they're not focused, we know they won't learn. Now that, okay. So it's a bit like a computer analogy. So working memory is RAM, long-term memory is the hard drive or the cloud, and so when RAM's no longer needed, it dumps things. Or a desk space analogy. So we could think of working memory as the top of your desk, and when you need a file, you go to a drawer. The hard drive will be like the drawers or the filing cabinets, and you get information out, you put it on the desk, that's your working memory, and when you don't need it, you put it away and you get the next thing out. And so it's like these sorts of things. And so we have working and long-term memory are like those things. Or like that. Is anyone's office like that? Someone said yes. Anyway, so what we've been doing is looking at what sort of instruction can ease the burden on working memory when students are learning in the early stages. And then as they develop their long-term memory, they engage in more independent learning activities. Because we know that if we throw students into independent learning activities too early, before they've mastered the skill and content, their working memory jams and they can't learn. But if we release them to independent learning, once they've got the basics, we know they can engage in quality independent learning at that point. So the aim of instruction is, in the early phases of learning, reducing the burden on the learner. And we do that by presenting material in sequenced, structured and bite-sized ways, so it doesn't jam working memory. You just hold students by the hand online and walk them slowly through the early stages of learning. There is some repetition that's needed because that's how we burn it in long-term memory. It's like burning the old floppy disks and so on. And so students do need to do things a few times to master and store it in long-term memory. But once you say, right, they've got the basics, they move on to more independent and self-directed activities and inquiry-based learning and so on. And so the point I want to make is quality instruction includes both explicit at the front end, and when the students have understood, it then involves more inquiry-based and problem-based approaches. In that order. If you do it around the other way, students' working memory is jammed, they don't know enough, and they don't learn. But if you get the horse in front of the cart, and so explicit structured instruction at the beginning, and when you say, right, they've got it, they move on. And so load reduction instruction has 5 key principles. And so these are guidelines for how to engage, how to develop lessons and deliver instruction online in a way that students are walked through from novice to expert. The first is reducing the difficulty of instruction in the initial stages of learning as appropriate to prior learning. So you need to know, before you start anything, what do my students know? Because that determines how much you reduce the difficulty or not. First, one of the strongest effects in educational psychology is what we call the prior learning effect. What students walk in with is in terms of what they know, is one of the most powerful determinants of how they'll perform in a task. And so you have to know, and in online education, in a class, you can do some Q&A and get it sent and a little worksheet and quiz. But online, you have to put more thought into it. How do I know where my students are at? Because if you dive in too deep, too soon, they won't understand it. The course ratings will be poor and the reputation goes down. At the same time, if it's too easy, then they'll be bored. So you do need to know where they're at. The second is instructional support and scaffolding. So good scaffolding through tasks in the early stages of learning. Opportunities for practice. For complex things, we usually need to do them a few times so that we store it and encode it in long-term memory. And then finally, when you are satisfied, they know it, they know the basics, you then have an activity where they stretch their wings and they engage in more independent self-directed activities. So we have these 5 principles. So in terms of practice, we have this process from direct instruction through to discovery learning, from explicit instruction through to exploratory learning, from instructional approaches to inquiry-based. Both ends of that spectrum involve quality learning, but it is the order in which you do it that is key. What about high ability students? So if you've got an advanced class, can you jump in at the deep end and just dive straight into inquiry-based learning? We find no. We find that even high ability students need some clear instruction at the start, but the difference between high ability students and other students is they move from novice to expert much faster. So they only need to do it once before they've understood it, whereas other students may need to do it 2 or 3 times. And so high ability students also need some direct instruction and explicit instruction. I've been to selective schools in Australia where there's the highest performing schools in Australia, and they're getting some of them get poor results in their final year 12 exams, and they asked me in to try and figure out what was going on. And what was going on was the teachers were saying, oh, these kids are smart. We can just dive right into the middle of Shakespeare and they'll understand it. No, they couldn't. These students are smart. They know how to write a topic sentence. They know how to write the start of a good paragraph. No, they needed to be taught. We weren't born with an innate ability to write a topic sentence or to do long division or to solve quadratic equations. We need to be taught that. And so high ability students do as well, but you can move through it faster and you can move them to discovery and inquiry-based learning sooner. So, some 5 principles. So I'm going to take the first 2 of LRI's principles together. Reducing the difficulty and instructional support. So the first is some pre-testing. So remember, getting back to the start of my keynote, I'm not telling you how to structure your departments. I don't know. That's not my business. I don't know about technology and what sorts of Wi-Fi and all that, or devices are. That's not mine. My business is once you're in that, day 1 of that first online lesson or that first online experience, that's when I come into the picture. And that's what we're talking about here. So when you have your students at the first lesson, hi guys, hi everyone, pre-testing. You need to know very quickly what do they know, because that's where you know, do I come at this level or I come at that level? So get a sense of what do your learners already know. If you understand that, you know where to come in at, and you will not lose them in the first lesson. Some pre-training. If you realise, oh my goodness, they don't know a few things that I thought they did know, right? I'm going to have to spend half an hour going through this, because if you don't, you'll lose them for the rest of the course. And so some pre-training or some revision, some brief revision. All right, guys, let's go over some of that stuff from the last course. You might want to model some things and say, all right, I'm going to show you how to do this. You'll say, look, eventually you're going to be doing this yourself, but first I'll show you and what it looks like. Another way is a strategy called chunking, and so where you break tasks into bite-sized doable bits, where students see each little bit and they say, oh yeah, I can do that, and so you scaffold them through tasks. And so at Lifelong, there'll be a few PDFs that I refer to. Lifelong Achievement on their website has all those PDFs. Just download them and use them to your heart. Adapt them to your heart's content, because you'll need to change them a bit for your situation. What about principle number 3? Practice. So worked examples firstly. So show students, take the mystery out of what good work looks like. Show students what good work looks like. Share examples of good work. And then you say, right, you've seen that. I'm going to provide you with half of the work done, and I want you to now do the other half yourself. And so you're starting to, and that's called a partially worked example. And some guided practice, where you might talk students through a task and you guide them through. These are all ways to ease the burden on working memory when your students are new and novices to the material. You walk them through. Deliberate practice, where they actually, any musician, the beautiful music, I should have thanked the musicians, the beautiful music and the singing this morning, they didn't wake up this morning and do it for the first time. They have been practicing and practicing. Musicians, like sports people, elite sports people, they know how to develop expertise, and they know that they need to engage in deliberate practice to do that. What about principle number 4? So feedback and feed forward. So feedback is corrective information. So you say, look, you didn't get this right, that's feedback. Feed forward is where you give them an idea on how to improve next time. And so you launch them into the next task. Personal best, we in Australia, in EdPsych, we harness the idea of a lot of sports psychology, so personal best ideas in the classroom. And so we encourage students to strive for PBs, like an athlete would strive for a PB. And so we've developed, for example, a PB index sheet for teachers to score a student up on how they've been going, and also providing feedback on how to do that. What about principle number 5? Guided independent application. And so the first is independent practice. So when your students have the basic skills and knowledge, they might attempt a similar task on their own. And then when you look at it and you say, right, okay, they know what they're doing, they'll engage in a more discovery learning activity where they engage in quite a different task on their own. And so you can see even in the independence and self-directed stage, you assist them through it. So for you to reflect on, and just to tuck away, what ideas or strategies resonated? You know your students, you know your subject area, and you know where you're going. You're still learning also about where you're going, but which of those parts of instruction resonated? Moving from skill to will. It's one thing to have all the skills, but it's another thing to be interested. And Andrew was talking to that. When we force students to do something, motivation starts declining. When students start feeling like they have agency and some role in the learning process, their motivation goes up. I've developed the motivation and engagement wheel. This is about 1999 when it first was developed, that identifies the key processes and factors involved in human motivation and engagement. If you jump on Google Images, there'll be hundreds of this. And so it identifies the positive motivation, the positive engagement, the negative motivation, and the negative engagement. I'm not going to go through the whole wheel. I'm going to pull out a few bits that are relevant to online learning. There's also the motivation and engagement scale that's used to assess students on the motivation engagement wheel. Then there's a university version, a high school version, and a primary school version. So what parts of the wheel are relevant to online learning? Well, I'm going to use a sentence, and we call it a powerful cocktail, if you like. And that is, when a student says, I know that I can do it, and I know how to do it, they are in almost perfect motivational space. You think about it. If you've been given a task and you think to yourself, I know that I can do this and I know how to do this, you are in the perfect motivational space. And so when you say, I know that I can do it, we refer to that as self-belief and confidence. When you say a task, it might even be in your social life, it might even be in family life, but whatever. When you say, I know that I can do this, you are basically saying, I'm confident. When you say, I know how to do it, you are saying, I am in control. And another part of how is self-regulation, and that is, I know how to manage myself through this situation. And so, how do we, in an online environment, give students a sense that when they're learning, they say, I know that I can do this. In the middle of the lesson, or when you assign a task, they get it and they say, I know that I can do that, because that's ideally what you want. Because they'll be then confident, motivated learners. That's what you want. So one of the things that boosts our confidence, all of our confidence, including mine, is doing something well. When you do something well, that is an immediate confidence booster. You feel, the word is efficacious. Hey, I can do that. And for that moment, you are confident in your self-belief. And so that chunking strategy was one way to build success into students' lives, where you break the task down and students can see every bit and they say, oh yeah, I can do that bit. Yeah, I can do that bit. And you boost their confidence. That's what chunking does. When you break large tasks into small, bite-sized bits, the learner sees it doable. Another way to build success into students' lives, because as Andrew said, you cannot force success. You can't just say, oh look, let's just give them good marks just to boost their confidence. We know that doesn't work because it reduces their sense of control. They don't know how they got that good mark, so they don't know how to get it again. And so it backfires. So students do have to get marks they deserve. So you can't force success on students in an online situation, but you can give them greater access to success. And one is process definitions of success. And Andrew was getting at this when he was talking about competence-based education. And so, too many students have what we call outcome success definitions. Topping the class. If you top the class, that's success. Or if you're in the top 3, that's success. Well, it is, but only one student can top the class. If the other students define that as success, they cut themselves off from success instantly. So how do we give all students access to success? And that's where process successes are important. One is personal bests. So yeah, you might not be the best in the class, but did you do better than you did before? So you are your own competition, PBs. And in online environments, we find they can be quite helpful, where it's very formative and you are actually improving on yourself. Another process success is improvement. If you are improving, what more can we ask of you educationally if you're improving? Another is effort. All students have access to effort. Only one student can top the class, but all students can invest effort. And if the instructor recognises that as one form of educational success, trying hard, and it is, then every student in the class has access to that. The point I'm making is when students feel like they're succeeding in your online environment, their confidence is boosted, their motivation is boosted, and they enjoy what they're doing. Explaining things more than once but in different ways. That is an opportunity online education can afford you. Different ways, different modes, different online and cyber opportunities. What about control? So this is the student who says, I know how to do it. So when they're presented with a task in your online environment, they say, I know that I can do it, that's their confidence, and I know how to do it, that's the control. So how do we give students a sense that they are in control, they are in the driver's seat? Well, what we find is if we focus on 3 things that are in their control, their sense of control rises. The first is effort. How hard a student tries is in their control. The second is strategy. The way they try is in their control. And the third is their attitude. What they think about themselves, the task, that's in their control. The more they focus on good luck or bad luck, easy marking, tough marking, good teacher, bad teacher, they're out of their control. And if you want to focus on that, you're not going to feel you're in the driver's seat. And so we ask students, remind them 3 things that are in your court, that are in your control, how hard you try, how well you try, and what you think of yourself, the task, and so on. Another way to build control is through feedback and feed forward. That is, when you provide information on how the student can improve next time, they say, oh, okay, that's how you do it. And so they know, they can say then, I know how to do it. Take the mystery out of what good work looks like. In online environments in the early stages, students are very confused about what sort of work should I submit, what does it look like. Show students what good work looks like so they say, oh, okay, I know how to do that now, and they do it. This is all about control. And the third is self-regulation. I mentioned this at the start. One of the moderators would have been distractions and things like that. And distractions block up working memory. In an online environment, there are distractions that happen there, but not so much in class, in-person environments. And so for cyber education, we need to be mindful of these. One is students have great capacity to go off track when they are not in the classroom with you, because the teacher can spot it in the classroom. They say, right, hang on, what are you doing? And online, they have great capacity to go off track, and there's no one there to bring them back on track. And so need to think about that. They try to do too many things at once. So they're answering an email halfway and they're jumping in between. So they're running your lecture. We all do it, let's be honest. But we're multitasking. And if we think about getting back to memory, if our working memory is that big, that means multitasking is usually going to fail us. The information just isn't going to get back there if you're answering an email while your class is having a discussion online, or texts and things like that. Another thing that can happen online is that students dive into very deep rabbit holes, and they don't know when to stop searching or when to pull out and try something else. Another is that they're continually monitoring social media. That will block working memory immediately. And in many cases, it's more interesting than the online lesson. And so we gravitate to it. And then also, students can abandon academic tasks for things like gaming and so on very easily. It's much harder in a classroom. You're going to have to think about this, because if you're fully online or fully cyber or predominantly cyber, these are things that where Australian students are absolutely struggling and failing with. And how are you going to manage that if much of your education is going to be in this environment? The reality of the human condition are all of these things, which is also why I wanted to share with you that slide on the memory system. Once you understand working memory and long-term memory, this becomes a disaster for that. Poor impulse control. And so, until about the age of 25, our brain is still developing, and the last part of our brain to develop is the frontal lobe, which is responsible for impulse control. And what that means is, when a text comes in and they think, will I respond to the text or will I stay focused on my online class? When you have poor impulse control, you respond to the text. Whereas now at age 57, I can turn things off, and if an email comes in, I'll leave it till tomorrow. I can do all that now because I'm well beyond 25. But a lot of your students are still going to be at an age where their brain is developing, including their capacity to control their impulse. So, how do we increase self-regulation? Well, chunking is another one. Very structured activities so that students stay hooked into the task. Negotiating a timetable for students about when they do their online tasks and when they catch up on social media. I think have that conversation up front. Don't pretend social media doesn't exist. Don't pretend gaming does not exist. It does. And so an open and fearless and honest conversation with your class at the start of a course, start setting some guidelines. Because for a lot of students, this is news to them. They think, oh, I'm an adult, I can do what I want, and I can control, I don't look at social media. Have that conversation. Identifying a place at home or elsewhere where there are few distractions, and so they can concentrate best. Encouraging students to turn off all unnecessary online apps when they're engaged in particular tasks. Encouraging students to get a good night's sleep. If they are not sleeping, they're not going to learn much the next day. And so, your challenge is the same as my challenge. My sons are now older, But where is that phone? Where is that laptop? It is not in the bedroom at night. You're going to sleep. And so, encouraging students to set personal habits, because they are at an age where their parents may not have so much control. So personal habits will work well for them. So, what of those motivation and engagement ideas resonated? I picked out of the wheel the key factors that really are relevant to online education and keeping students switched on. Which brings me to the final moderator. The third factor that makes a difference in how effective online learning will be, and that is your connection to your students. And again, I'm not talking about, knowing every part of their life. It's not possible. But having a functional link where they're happy to ask for help, they listen to what you say. So these ideas, the extent to which students will listen to you will very much depend on the relationship you build. So in about the third or fourth lesson, if they're feeling connected and you revisit some of these and you say, all right guys, you're keeping those mobile phones out of the bedroom, you're getting a good night's sleep, because you've now connected with them, they'll say, yeah, okay, all right, I respect her, I trust her. Or I respect him, I trust him. So, we are social creatures. And this is something that cyber education must wrap its head around, because it is by definition remote. And how do we reconcile these things? Why did Dr. Lala go to all this trouble to have us in the one place? Bring me out from Australia, Andrew from Bangkok. Why? Have others zooming in. Why collect us together? We could have done this, because when we're together, there's something about it. And so the task for online learning is to understand, well, what things were happening here today that motivated Lala to go to all this trouble, and his team, and the dean and the vice rector are all in attendance. Why? And so we're social creatures. Interpersonal relationships are integral to our learning. When you were at school, you learnt more from that teacher who you felt connected to. You liked and loved the subjects as much because the subject was interesting, but because the teacher, something got you in. And so in an online environment, how do you keep these connections? So email, your online learning platforms like Moodle, staying connected, video, blogs, class chat groups, all these ways just to throw lines out all the time, because they're not coming in here. You've got to connect out there. If in doubt, over-communicate with students rather than under-communicate. And so the final thing I'll introduce to you is this idea of connective instruction that we've been doing research around. It's an educational approach that helps teachers maintain connectedness in the everyday course of learning. So you don't have 4 weeks to get to know every student. You have to start teaching today. So how do we build relationships into the everyday course of what we're doing, including online learning? And so connective instruction, there are 3 key parts to how teachers connect to students. The first is the one we usually think of, interpersonal. 2 people getting on. Hey, I like you. I know you're interested in me. That's interpersonal. But teachers, lecturers, tutors, instructors have 2 other big channels on which to connect to their students. The next one is the substantive relationship. What content you are giving them, what tasks and assignments and activities you are asking them to do. And the third is the pedagogical. How you talk to them, how you ask them to do things, how you administer tasks. And so in our research, we've identified a top 10. These are the things we're finding educators are doing when students are connected to them. And the question is, how do you infuse this in your online education? So we now research, these are the 10 key principles of positive interpersonal relationships between teacher and student. And so they're guiding ideas. This can be done in class as it can be done in online, but it must especially be done online, otherwise students will not feel connected to you. We've got a top 10 message. Ask yourself these. How will you build this into your online education? Because our research is clear, the teachers that are connecting to students on the substantive, the message, they're doing these things. And the final one is the pedagogical, the relationship with teaching itself, not the relationship with teacher, the relationship with teaching. And so I ask educators, how well are you doing this? How much thought are you giving this when you are connecting online? And as Andrew indicated, through COVID, when everyone was in remote and hybrid, these were the things that were keeping students feeling connected, and by implication, mental health and well-being as well. So, which of those ideas resonated? So as I indicated, I'm not top-down. Why? I'm a psychologist. I'm interested in you. How do I help you? So Andrew gave some good ideas, but as well as some good bottom-up ideas. But so I am, once you're in that online environment, how do you switch students on? How do you inspire? How do you energise? And how do you teach stuff that they need to learn that you want them to store in long-term memory? So where to from here? So almost all of my publications you'll be able to get on my ResearchGate account. So go there and have a lot of fun. And so please visit there. That has not only my academic publications but my publications for teachers and practitioners. I'll be giving Lala select slides, and so he will distribute those or post them online as appropriate. So for each of the things I spoke about, I've got references, papers I've written, and so in the select slides you'll have access to all of that. Okay, so that was my brief review of online learning. These are papers I've written on load reduction instruction for scholars. These are papers I've written for practitioners on load reduction instruction. And these are papers I've written on motivation and engagement and teacher-student relationships. So you can just go to any one of those and dive in and see what I've been saying. And remember, it's all available on my ResearchGate. So just head there. Thank you very much for your attention.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Professor Martin. Personally, there are so many information and things that I recently know. Can you see? I wrote down so many things. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that it can illuminate us about how to maintain and develop learning and motivation in online environment. So now I will open Q&A and discussion session for you. If you have question or probably a topic to discuss, please raise your hand, mention your name, and say your affiliation also. Is there any? Anyone? Yeah. Can anyone help me to? Okay.
Okay, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm really impressed to see you today, Professor Martin and Professor Ryan. My name is Ega. I have a question for you. Um, because this university has changed into a cyber university, um, what is the cyber university strategy? Sorry, I'm sorry, I'm really nervous.
Please go. That's fine.
Okay, I'm sorry. In this educational 5.0 era, a cyber university should integrate technologies such as artificial intelligence, robotics, big data, and etc. It of course to personalize the teaching and learning. So my question is, what's the cyber university strategy should have? Maybe digital infrastructure or policy or etc. to develop students' critical thinking or students' curiosity. Even artificial intelligence cannot answer the students' questions anymore. Thank you. I think that's all.
Thank you for that question. And that question will need an entire new conference. It's such an important question. But I'll give it a go. And this is a question that we are all struggling with. Just understanding, even if it for every university, it doesn't matter whether if they're cyber or not cyber, they're really, where do these things sit in the future of our education? I'll take generative AI, but you mentioned some big ones actually, and maybe as a big picture thought. I know, getting back to Andrew's point, and also the opening addresses by our honorary leaders, honourable leaders. I think what is the point of differentiation for a cyber university? Because all universities are delivering online education, but so what makes a cyber? I think it's the opportunities that it allows, and that is not so available to other types of universities. And I think in being a cyber university, potentially you can be it's a word we call, it's very nimble and agile. I think because it's cyber, you can actually move reasonably quickly and follow trends and lead trends reasonably quickly, whereas other universities, because they've got in-class learning and all that, they move much more slowly. So I think its capacity to respond to how technology changes, that I think is actually a point of differentiation for a cyber university. And you mentioned a few things that it could be ahead of the curve on than other universities that are very hybrid or predominantly in class with only a little bit of cyber. So big data, digitization, generative AI, these are all things that are they're here now, but they're also going to be a big part of the future. And so I think a strategy for an emerging cyber university would be to say we can respond faster than others in putting material online and adapting material to address these big questions. So I think that's one point of potential strategy. And then I think it also has, there's two levels to a cyber university. One will be to be delivering online education and developing online education. And the other is, I'm looping back to Andrew again as well, the other is the scholarship of online learning, teaching and learning. So one is to be delivering, but the other is to be scholars of online learning, because we've got a lot to learn. You saw all that mixed evidence. And so I think a cyber university has an opportunity to lead research in how students learn. And a big reason for that is you're going to have so many students and opportunities to collect data, to figure out what works, what doesn't, and be a leader in the scholarship of online learning. And I think that's a unique opportunity for a cyber university that other universities don't have such a capacity for, and they're not even motivated to do it. Because they're doing in-class learning, they don't need to invest in the scholarship of online learning. They see it more as an add-on, where for you it's core business. And so you can be leaders in the scholarship of teaching and learning in an online environment. The other question is, and there are big questions around, so generative AI, that is here and now, and Andrew was sharing statistics on how many are using it, and that's how many admit using it. There's still a lot of people saying, I don't use it, and they do. So there are big underreporting of generative AI, but increasingly more and more students and teachers are using it. Where does that sit in a student's development? And so we're wrestling with that right now, and it is my view that, and again, I'm coming off Andrew as well, it's my view that it augments learning, it doesn't replace it, and so I believe that the students who are going to make the most of generative AI will be the students that have the most in their long-term memory, that know the most. Why? Because they, and I've watched them using GPT, they will pose far better and richer questions to GPT and get better answers. And you can only pose good questions when you know the material. And so I believe that in fact the students that because potentially students can just be lazy through their entire degree, let GPT tell them stuff, and they won't have anything in their long-term memory. Whereas the students that take the time to learn it, they're going to be the ones that are going to leverage technology the best. And so I still believe in students learning material and knowing it, because they're providing better prompts to GPT, and they're also better able to spot when GPT is throwing up information that's wrong. And so I think I think in the end, in a funny way, I believe in some ways a classic education, that is students learning the material themselves and just having GPT as a, Microsoft Word uses this word, as a co-pilot, not as the pilot, not as the captain, as a co-pilot. I suspect that's the future, and I suspect they'll be the strongest students. That's where I think it will land. Sure, you can let GPT do everything, but I think at great risk and great peril to yourself as an individual. But it will play a place, because I think it will augment strong students. Thank you for the question.
Great. I hope that it answered your question, right? Is there anyone? Professor Andrew Ryan.
Is that allowed?
It's not allowed.
It is allowed.
Can I just make a comment? I mean, I agree with you entirely. I wanted to show a kind of point of difference between your answer to the last question and where I think we're going. Because you were talking about cyber university as having all this big data and AI and so on, but I think there is one side that you spent an hour talking about but didn't mention in your answer, which is that in reality it's not enough. The big data is not enough. The chat GPTs are not enough. We need to delve deeper into people. Whether it's using the kind of work that you were doing. I mean, it's a pity I wasn't able to talk about some of the stuff we're doing with intonation and so on, because actually the whole notion of chunking, the whole notion of load reduction at that level, there's work done at Cornell on grouping of information and how it's taken in through language and so on, and rhythmic structures as being ways of having economical processing of language and so on. So I thought the key is actually in people, in psychology. Perhaps psychology more than we have given it credit before. to help us with the learning process. The other small comment I would make is that it seems to me that most of the discussion that you've been giving us has been around a teacher-led system, whereas perhaps one of the strengths of cyber education is to go towards a more independent learning structure, which has no necessary I mean, I'm not against teaching, and I'm not against teachers. I'm saying that once we have a variety of approaches, including teachers and non-teachers, and capitalizing on the psychology, perhaps through AI, we'll have a much bigger system able to take in more students and meet the needs of a country and of people scattered all over the place in a better way than we are doing now. And one of the ways of dealing with face-to-face work and relationships, which I agree with completely, is through things like perhaps immersive virtual reality, where you can be together but not together. So thank you so much.
Yes, so I would absolutely agree. The risks inherent at a broader level with cyber education is to just not understand that at the end of every Wi-Fi connection is a human being, and MOOCs, and this is where MOOCs fall right down, because as I was saying, you just feel like one of 600,000. So I absolutely agree, Andrew. I think the point you contested around independent and autonomous learning, Andrew has landed on something that I think early on you'll need to have real robust discussions about, because this is a real, in my view, a terrain that we constantly wrestle with, and the point of difference between Andrew and I think it's great that they're aired, because you need to discuss this and think it through, and so I hold Andrew in the highest regard, and I also am very fond of him. We're real mates. We're mates, but this is the question of where does the balance tilt, and my view is that independent learning, self-directed learning, and so on, comes a little further into the process than many other educators would have it. And so others would say more independence and perhaps a little earlier. I'm cautious on independence, but a lot of that is through my epistemological and scholarly lens. That's how I see the world, and the data, when I look at the data, it tells me that. There are potentially more people that would land on Andrew's side of the equation in education. Do you think? And it's not a binary thing. No, but it's something to wrestle with and get clear. Yeah, I understand. Yeah. No, But I think it's a gentle tension that is healthy, but yeah, yeah. But it is a risk in online education, but because there is I guess I'm guarding against assumptions about how much and how soon, and you're not saying that. No, but it is a common trap for online education.
Okay. Sorry, Professor Andrew Lyon and Martin. I think we can continue this discussion tomorrow, right? Okay. But I think it is a good example for us that the two speakers are very initiative to talk about the improvement of this institution, right? Okay. It's a good example, Professor Andrew Lyon and Andrew Martin. So actually, I have one question, but I will let someone here to give a question. Yeah. Okay.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Hello, Mr. Andrew Lyon and Andrew Martin. I just want to ask you a simple question, Prof. In your PowerPoint, you said that the relation between students and teachers. In your opinions, how to enhance or fostering the curiosity in students? Because our education is only focusing on finding a job, and when we are graduated, we are no longer have a desire to learning again. Maybe that's enough for me. Thank you.
Okay, yes. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. They're very good questions today, and it is a simple question, but also we could also have another conference to answer it. So I'll talk as an educational psychologist, and so in our theory and in our research, what you're referring to is a form of valuing. And so I value education because it will get me a job. And we call that utility value or usefulness value. And that's what we're always, we'll tell our own children, they'll say, oh, why do I have to learn this? Oh, well, it'll get you into university, it'll get you a good job. And so that's called usefulness or utility valuing. But it's not always, it's a good form of valuing, but it's not always, but there are other forms. And so one form is what's called intrinsic value. And that is, you're learning it because it's interesting. Yeah, it may get you a job, but I also like this subject because it's interesting. And so that's called intrinsic value. So there are some subjects when a student says, why do I have to learn linear algebra? And you can't say, oh, because it'll get you a job. It won't get you a job. For maybe a rocket scientist, it will get them a job. But for everyone else, they say, no, it won't. But if you can make it interesting, then that's good reason enough for them to value it and to be connected to you as a teacher. Another form of valuing is what's called importance valuing, and that is where you value something because it's important. And so there are some things we learn, it won't get you a job, and sometimes it's not very interesting, but it's very important, and we can see that. And so these are the different types of valuing that you can have. And you talked about one, which is getting a job. And then the third type of valuing is what we call cost value. And that is, and this is actually a big thing in online education, because it's where a student, when you give them homework, that night they'll sit there and they'll need to make a decision. Will I do this, or will I get on my gaming? Will I do this homework, or will I check my text messages and my WhatsApp and Facebook? So, and what they have to do is decide the cost of gaming or whatever is too great to my education, so I'll do my homework. And we're always making cost decisions. Should I do this or should I do that? And we decide by weighing the two up and saying where is the biggest cost and where is the biggest gain. And so we like to assign work to students where they look at it and say, look, yeah, I'd rather be gaming, but this homework's important and I'll decide to do it. So that's a roundabout answer to your question about the different ways we can connect and the different valuings we can build into our education.
Okay, thank you, Professor Martin. So should we have time? Okay. Oh, Professor Martin, I will give a question personally after this, okay? Because the time is up. Okay, so thank you for the enthusiasm of the all audiences, and let me conclude this session by, let's say, take a note from the Professor Martin's talk that there are unique teaching and learning opportunities in online education, and also some barriers to learning that must be navigated. And from the presentation, Professor Martin has identified important principle of effective instruction with particular attention to how they apply in online environment. And also the presentation have shown us how to get optimal balance between explicit instruction and less structured approach. Taken together, the keynote brings together major theory and research to help us as educators to optimize students' learning and motivation in online education environments. And I hope that this session will be fruitful for you and enhance and also build the constructive ideas of how online environment should be. Thank you for your attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Ladies and gentlemen, for the next agenda is hand over the souvenir from Cyber Islamic State University to the keynote speaker. Kepada Profesor Dr. Jamali untuk menyerahkan cindera matanya.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue to the next agenda, please take a break for 30 minutes and back to this auditorium at 1:30 p.m. Thank you.
Dimohon untuk kembali ke auditorium pada pukul 1.30.